The man at the kitchen table was not her husband. He wore her husband's wedding ring and answered to her husband's name, but the man she had married in the spring of 1942 had been left somewhere over Germany, and what had come home in his place was a stranger who flinched when the icebox motor kicked on. Margaret Holloway, who had not slept more than 4 hours at a stretch since the second week of March, set the coffee in front of him and did not pretend otherwise. "Drink it while it's hot, Daniel." Daniel Holloway. Lately, Staff Sergeant, formerly Bombardier on a B-17 named Lucky Penny out of a base in East Anglia he was not supposed to talk about and now did not talk about for other reasons, picked up the cup with both hands and held it without drinking. The hands were the same, the wrists were the same. The hollow at the base of his throat where she had used to set her cheek before he shipped out was the same. Everything else had been replaced. He had been home 11 weeks. He had said perhaps 200 sentences in the whole of those weeks, and 40 of them had been spoken in his sleep. A car horn sounded out on Linden Street and his cup rattled in the saucer. The coffee slopped over his thumb. He did not seem to notice it had burned him. "Honey." She put her hand on his wrist. "It's the Peterson boy. He honks when he turns at our corner. He's done it since he was 16. "I know." "Then it shouldn't." "I know, Margaret." He took the cup to the sink and washed it himself, the way he had washed every dish since he came home, folded every towel, stacked every newspaper in a square pile, lined his 3 pairs of shoes by the wall in size order. The dispensary doctor at Fort Dix had said some of them came back like that, some tearing the house down, and a third sort not really at all, and that she should count herself lucky to have one of the first. He had been 28 and had not, she suspected, spent a single night next to one of them. The radio was saying the time. She turned it off before the news bulletin. The night before there had been a long story about the trial at Nuremberg, and he had walked out the back door and not come in until 2 in the morning. "I have to go to the Hendersons," she said. "Ruth's expecting me at 10. I'll be back by lunch." "All right." "Will you be?" "I'll be in the yard." She did not ask doing what. She walked the 4 blocks to the Hendersons through April light that should have felt like a deliverance and felt like a kind of cruelty instead, because the war was over and the boys were home and the women on the porches waved as though everything were fixed. Ruth's husband had spent the war in a Baltimore shipyard and had come home heavier and louder and exactly himself. Ruth would not have known what to do with Daniel any more than Margaret did, but Ruth had been her closest friend since the 8th grade, and Margaret had to talk to someone before she went under. Ruth poured coffee at the kitchen table and waited. "He doesn't sleep," Margaret said. "He sits up in the chair by the window. He keeps the curtain open an inch. I asked him once what he's watching for, and he looked at me like I'd asked him what color the sky is, and he said, 'I'm not watching. I'm listening.' I asked what he was listening for. He said he didn't know yet." Ruth nodded. "He flinches at the icebox. He flinches at the screen door. He flinched at the Peterson boy's horn this morning and burnt his hand on the coffee and didn't notice. Last Tuesday, I dropped a saucepan and he was on the kitchen floor with his arms over his head, and I had to kneel on the linoleum and tell him it was a pan. It was just a pan, until his eyes came back." "And the talking?" "Almost none. He says please and thank you, and he asks what's for supper. When his mother came over on Sunday, he sat through the whole visit and said 9 words. I counted." Ruth set her cup down. "You counted 9 words. I counted 40 in his sleep. They aren't English. Or they aren't always. I think 2 nights ago he was giving headings. 270, 270, over and over. Margaret." "I know. He needs a doctor." Fort Dix gave him a piece of paper that said combat fatigue and told him to take fresh air. "There's a man in Cleveland I read about. He treats flyers. $60 a week." "60. I know." They sat with that figure between them. Daniel's mustering out pay had covered 3 months' rent and the back-out tax on his father's small machine shop, which he had inherited in 1944 from a Quonset hut in Suffolk and had not yet set foot inside. "What does he want, Margaret?" "He hasn't said." "Has he asked?" She looked up. Ruth was a kind woman and had not meant the question cruelly, but the question landed cruelly anyway, because Margaret had been so busy reading him for signs that she had not, in 11 weeks, sat down across from him and asked. She walked home faster than she had walked over. Daniel was not in the yard. The back door stood open. She found him in the parlour, sitting on the floor in front of the open lower drawer of the secretary, his flight jacket spread across his knees, his hands inside the inner pocket. He looked up when she came in and did not stand. The jacket was the leather. A 2. He had worn off the plane in Sioux Falls in February, sergeant stripes, unit patch, 4 small painted bombs along the breast, for the 4 missions he had flown after the squadron stopped counting. "What did you find?" she asked. "A picture." He held it out. It was the snapshot she had sent him in November 1943 of herself standing in front of the new lilac bush at the side of the house. She had been 28 years old in the picture, and on the back she had written, in pencil that had not faded, "Waiting on you. The lilacs and I both." "I kept it in the jacket," he said. "All 4 planes." "4 planes?" "They gave me 3. The first 2 came back with holes. The third one went down over Magdeburg with another crew. I was on a 48. She sat down on the rug in front of him. She had not known there had been 4 planes. The army had not, in any letter home, told her that her husband had outlived 2 airframes and a borrowed crew. "Daniel." "Yes." "What do you want?" He looked at her. He did not look away. It was the first time, in 11 weeks, that he had let her look back at him without ducking his head. "I don't know," he said. "I haven't been allowed to want anything since 1942. I think I forgot how." "Then we'll start small." "Start with what?" "Tell me what you don't want." He thought about that. The thinking took a long time and she let it. "I don't want the radio on after 7, he said finally. "I don't want anyone to ask me what it was like. I don't want my mother to bring the casserole. I don't want to go to the Memorial Day parade. I don't want the lights on in the bedroom. I don't want pity from the men at the shop. I don't want to be told I'm lucky." She wrote none of it down. She did not need to. "All right," she said. "Now tell me one thing you do want. One thing." He looked past her, at the lilac bush, through the parlor window. The buds were tight green still, a week away from opening. "I want to walk down to the river," he said. "I haven't been. I want to walk down with you and sit on the bank and not say anything and come home before dark. We can do that today. Today. This afternoon, as soon as I make sandwiches." He nodded. He did not smile, but a muscle near his eye loosened in a way that she had not seen loosened since 1942, and Margaret understood, sitting on the rug in front of a man who was not quite her husband and not yet a stranger any longer, that this was what a marriage was now going to be. Not the picking up of an interrupted thing, but the slow making of a different one, a quieter one, the both of them learning a new pair of names. They walked to the river. He carried the basket. She carried a thin blue blanket folded over her arm. He flinched once at a backfire from a delivery truck on Front Street, and she did not pretend she had not seen it. She put her hand through his elbow and held it there, and they walked the next block as one body, and the flinch passed. The river was high with spring runoff. They sat on the long flat rock where he had asked her in 1941 if she might consider not finishing her teacher's certificate for 1 year and marrying him instead. She had said yes that day and finished the certificate anyway, and had taught 3rd grade at Lincoln School the 3 years he was overseas, and had not, in all that time, let a single student hear her sound afraid. They ate the sandwiches. They drank the lemonade from the thermos. The sun was low and gold over the water. A heron stood in the shallows on the far side of the river and held still for a long time and then opened its wings and went. "Margaret." "Yes." "The shop. Your father's. It's been sitting since August of 44. I want to open it." She looked at him. "All right. I don't know if I can do the books. I can do the lathe and the drill press. My father taught me both before I was 12. I don't know if I can stand in a room with 3 other men who'll ask where I was. You can stand in a room with 3 other men who'll be glad of work. We can post a hand-lettered card at the hardware store. The Peterson boy needs a job. He's good with his hands. He won't ask. He's 17. The war is something his brother went to. His brother came back, North Africa. He's all right. He's selling insurance in Toledo." Daniel nodded. He had been gone for the part of the war when the Peterson boy's brother had gone and come home. She watched him take the missing years into account. "We'll open the shop," he said. "Slowly, slowly. And I'll see the man in Cleveland." She turned her head sharply. "How did you—" "Ruth's husband told me 3 weeks ago, on a Saturday at the hardware store, that you had been reading about him in a magazine. I haven't been able to bring myself to mention it. I'm mentioning it now." She sat for a long time, looking at the river. "The $60, she said. "I sold the watch." "What watch?" "The Hamilton. The one the squadron commander gave us all when we made it through 20. I sold it Wednesday at the pawn shop in Norwalk. I got $211. It's in the second from top drawer of the secretary under the warranty papers for the refrigerator. I should have told you that too." She put her hand on top of his hand on the blanket. You should have. I'm telling you now. Yes, she said, you are. The heron came back along the far bank and stood again in the same place. They watched it. Daniel breathed slowly, the way a man breathes when he is making himself do it deliberately, and she breathed with him because for 11 weeks she had not been sure he was breathing at all. There was a kid named Friedman, he said, after a while. On the third plane, the one that went down over Magdeburg, he took my seat on a 48. I asked him to. I had a head cold and the doctor was about to ground me, and I asked Friedman to switch because he wanted the hours and I wanted the bunk. The bird went in at 26,000 feet. The rear gunner got out. Friedman did not. Daniel, I'm not asking you to fix it. I'm telling you because the man in Cleveland is going to want to know, and I wanted you to hear it first. Thank you. For what? For telling me first. They sat until the sun went into the trees. The river darkened. They folded the blanket together and walked home in the long blue dusk, and she let her arm stay through his elbow the whole way, and he did not flinch at the delivery truck on Front Street, which had finished its rounds and gone home. That night she fell asleep in the bedroom with the lights off, the way he had asked for, and at some point near 3 in the morning he came in from the chair by the window and lay down on top of the coverlet beside her without taking off his shoes. She did not move. She did not speak. She put her hand on his chest over the place where the 4 small painted bombs would have been on the jacket, and she felt him let out a breath that had been held since 1942, and after a few minutes he turned and put his face into her shoulder and slept. He slept 7 hours. She knew because she counted them, and because she lay awake for all 7 and watched the room go grey and then gold, and because for the first time since the 11th of March she thought she might be able to tell, by Christmas, the difference between the man on the pillow next to her and the man she had married. She thought they might both be people she could love. She thought it would not be the marriage she had imagined in 1941. She thought it would be the marriage she had been given, and she found, watching his shoulder rise and fall in the slow, honest rhythm of true sleep, that she was no longer afraid of it. The shop opened on the first Tuesday of May. Daniel hand-lettered a card for the corkboard at Hellman's Hardware. The Peterson boy came that Wednesday with his sleeves rolled up and was hired before noon. A man named Cassidy, who had lost a foot at Anzio, came the following week and was hired before he had finished asking. Daniel hung no citations on the wall. He hung instead, above the lathe, the snapshot of Margaret in front of the lilac bush, and Cassidy came up that day and looked at the picture and said, "Your wife?" And Daniel said, "My wife." And Cassidy clapped him lightly on the shoulder and went back to his bench, and Daniel did not flinch. He saw the man in Cleveland on Tuesdays and Fridays through the summer. He stopped seeing him in November. He never, in his life, told Margaret what he had told that man. He did not need to. She had seen what the telling cost him on the days he came home from the train, and she had seen what it gave him back, and she had not asked for the words. The lilacs opened the first week of May. He cut a single sprig and brought it into the kitchen and put it in a glass of water on the windowsill above the sink. And Margaret, drying her hands on the dish towel, looked at the sprig and at her husband and thought, There you are. They did not, in the years that followed, become the couple they would have been if the war had not happened. They became, slowly, the couple they were going to be instead. They had 2 children, they kept the shop, they lived in the small house on Linden Street for the rest of their lives. He never went to a Memorial Day parade, she never asked him to. On the night before each anniversary of the 3rd plane going down over Magdeburg, he sat up in the chair by the window with the curtain open an inch, and she sat with him, and they did not speak, and in the morning he made the coffee, and she made the toast. And that was their offering to the kid named Friedman, who had taken his seat on a 48. 41 years later, when Daniel died in his sleep in the bedroom of the house on Linden Street, Margaret found, folded in the wallet on his dresser, the snapshot of herself in front of the lilac bush, the paper soft as cloth along the creases, and on the back, in his handwriting and not hers, the words he had written some night when she had been sleeping. Came home, she let me. Best years of my life were the ones after. She put the snapshot in the inside pocket of her own coat, where it stayed until she joined him 14 years on. The lilac bush, by then, had grown taller than the parlour window.